What's going on, everybody? It's your boy Yarel. Welcome to Spilling All the Tea. This segment is called Spirit and Soul. I know I've been away for a while more or less with this segment, but again, I like to make sure I'm operating within my left and right limits and don't want to act outside of what God really wants me to do or say. So this topic today, I'm going to talk about compromise. And like I said, one thing I will say, I will give you guys all the references. I will not necessarily be reading. I will be more or less paraphrasing. And that's only because I'm not trying to keep you guys here for a very long time. But I will, give you guys a reference. And if anything, I give you the reference. You can pause the video. You can go ahead, and read through and then come back if that's how you so choose to do it. The reason I want to talk about compromise is a lot of the times we tend to compromise on what we know is right and go against sometimes what God has said, and pretty much that can hurt us, they can hurt our blessings and a whole lot of other things. But at the same exact time, I have learned, and when I say compromise, I don't mean compromise in a good way like in a relationship. I mean compromise in what the right thing to do is, but instead of doing the right thing, you do the wrong thing, or somebody strongholds you where they'll hold something against you to get you to bend to their will. And I'll talk a little bit about that on a personal note at the end of the video. So I have three individuals that more or less five individuals, but three different scenarios that I want to talk about. So the first one is Joshua. So in the book of Genesis, it's 39. They said, I said Joshua, I mean Joseph. You have Joseph, who was sold into slavery by his brothers. And he ended up in Potiphar's house. And like I said, God granted him favor. And he was pretty much put over his entire house. Well, that happening, Potiphar's wife took an interest in him. And wanted him and have made advances, and he even said to her, your husband has kept nothing from me but you, because you are his wife. And it was one of those where it's just like, I'm not going to do that. Now, mind you, the whole committing of adultery, more or less, that we don't see that until the book of Exodus, but good moral standards is, okay, you two are one. I will not come in between that. He was doing what was just. And there was one point where she kind of, for what it's worth, backed him into a corner, and he got away. And you know what? Let me find exactly, because I don't want to be on here and say the wrong thing. Now, hold on. Yeah, and Genesis 39 verse 11, I said I wasn't going to read, but here I am reading. And I'm reading from the New Living Translation. One day, however, no one else was around when he went in to do his work. She came and grabbed him by his cloak, demanding, "Come sleep with me." Joseph tore himself away, but left his cloak in her hand as he ran from the house. And when that happened, she pretty much, having the cloak, yelled, pretty much saying that he was trying to sleep with her, this, that, and the third. Now, like I said, she wanted him to compromise and, pretty much lay with me. He did not want to do that. He chose to do what was right, what was just. Well, she decided to return the favor and, lie. And in doing that, Potiphar heard about it. Potiphar was very, very upset. But because of the favor, that Joseph had with God, the only thing that Potiphar did was just put him in prison. And I think it's also because of the simple fact that, Potiphar probably knew this was somewhat far-fetched. And here's the other thing, given the time, come on now, we all know that somebody sleeping with another man's wife during that time, he would have been sentenced to death, not jail. But that right there is an instance of, knowing what the right thing is to do and doing it instead of doing the wrong thing. And most people, especially if they are not familiar with this story, will say, Okay, well, he still has his life, but he ended up in jail. But I'm gonna say this, you know, we don't always see what God has for us at the very end. You know, we don't always see it. And I love Joseph because of just, you know, his story and just, you know, how, like, the amount of integrity that he had. And though he was put in prison, you know, I'm gonna say this, there's a reason we go through certain things in our life. There's a reason that we are in certain places, whether it be we've put ourselves there or God has us there because we need to learn something, gather something, whatever the case may be, or set a foundation. With him being in prison, Joseph had the gift to interpret. Well, he had dreams, but he can interpret others' dreams through, you know, the power of God. And he interpreted 2 dreams of the cupbearer and the baker. And the cupbearer, he interpreted his dream that, and this is me just kind of finishing this off, and this is in Genesis 40, and he pretty much said that, you know, pretty much in 3 days you're going to be back in your rightful position, you know, being the cupbearer, you know, to Pharaoh. I just asked that when you go back, you mention my name. Now, the cupbearer forgot, but when Pharaoh had a dream, and it was actually 2 dreams, strikingly similar but vastly different, it was at that time that the cupbearer remembered Joseph, mentioned Joseph. Joseph was summoned, you know, with, you know, through the power of God, he was able to interpret both dreams. And it was at that point that he was appointed pretty much the highest person, you know, there. And the king even said, I only outrank you by, you know, virtue of my position. But that's it. So that's one of those where a lot of people argue, well, he got thrown in jail, but had he not got thrown in jail, he would not have been able to interpret a dream that put him right there in front of Pharaoh to interpret both of his dreams to make him the right hand. Just saying. But, you know, so that's an instance of him not compromising and what happened. That's one. So the other one is in well, actually the last 2 are going to be in the book of Daniel. So the first is going to be in you know, the first chapter, and it's from verses 8 to 16, where when Nebuchadnezzar took over, you know, had his guys go and gather some people, more or less some very intelligent and whatnot, young men, and Daniel was in the midst. And it is at this point that kosher law was already in effect. So Daniel pretty much looked at all the food. Yeah, I'm not eating this. I'm pretty sure they're not going to eat this either. And because of the favor that he had with God, nothing crazy happened to him. But Daniel did say, you know what, why don't we do this? You know, pretty much feed me veggies, feed me water for the next, I believe it was like 10 days. And then come back and see what happens. That happened. They came back and saw that they looked good, if not better than all the other young men that they had recruited. And, you know, it was along those lines, if you continue to read in that chapter, that, you know, for what it's worth, they were given promotions because of the fact that, you know, God had given them such intellect and things of that nature. And when I say they, I mean Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. It was those 4. But that was one of those instances where he could have compromised. He could have ate whatever it is they had there. But because he loved God and trusted God and knew his word, he chose to not fall into that. And again, I mean, for what it's worth, you know, he's in the palace, but, you know, pretty much got a promotion out of it, if you will. 2 more instances in the same exact book. So, like I said, further down in Daniel 1, and it was verses 18 to 20, just to remember, you know, the positions that they were appointed. And then jump into Daniel 3, and more or less from verses 9 to 30. This is when Nebuchadnezzar built the statue and pretty much made it to where when you hear the music and whatnot, you know, you pretty much prostrate yourself, fall down, and, you know, show reverence. Well, some of the officials went back and told him, well, there are 3 Hebrews that are not doing that, and that's Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They are not doing it. And the punishment is whoever did not fall down on their faces and prostrate themselves, they would be thrown into the furnace. So when Nebuchadnezzar heard it, he was furious, like in his feelings, furious. And actually, this is actually one of those where I want to read off exactly what their response was. Give me a second, you guys. Let me see. Daniel 3. Okay, give me 1 second, you guys. I'm here. It's gotta find. Got it. Okay, so when Nebuchadnezzar heard it, he summoned them and he gave them one more chance to, you know, prove themselves. You know, just like, you know, fall on your face, do the right thing, and, you know, we're gonna let bygones be bygones. And all 3 of them pretty much replied, "Oh, Nebuchadnezzar, we do not need to defend ourselves before you. If we are thrown into the blazing furnace, the God whom we serve is able to save us. He will rescue us from the power, your majesty. But even if he doesn't, we want to make it clear to you, your majesty, that we will never serve your gods or worship the golden statue that you have set up." And that was one of those where it was just like, we know God, we know what he says, we know the promise. He will rescue us. But even if he does not, even if he don't, just want to let you know it's not going to happen. That right there is some bold stuff, y'all. Where it's just like, I know what God's promise for me is. But even if, you know, it's not meant for me to have that exact promise, I'm still not going to sit here and compromise and do what I know the right thing is. Because again, not supposed to worship any god but him, you know, no idols, none of that. So they know what you know, the word of God says. So of course Nebuchadnezzar was furious, had them crank up the furnace, I think maybe 6 times hotter than normal, and pretty much had them bound and thrown in. And apparently it was so hot that those throwing them in also died in the process. And Nebuchadnezzar had to ask his officials, did we not bound them up and throw them in there? And they was like, yes, we did. He was like, so why is it that I see 4 people roaming around, and out of those 4, 1 appears to be, you know, angelic? And it was at that point that they walked out. You know, like I said, nothing burned on them, clothes intact, hair intact, everything. And Nebuchadnezzar pretty much, for what it's worth, we can say, repentant for what it is that he did. But that was another instance where they knew what the consequences was. If we don't bow, we could lose our life. But you know what? That's perfectly fine. And that's why I say, more or less with this, you got to be bold for that one. You got to be bold to have such a conviction such as that. And the very last one is Daniel 6. So this is when King, I believe it's Darius, had come to power. And Darius pretty much had favor, found favor more or less with Daniel. Loved him. And of course the other administrators and whatnot could not stand Daniel because he was a righteous man. So, and they were trying to find fault with him, but they could not. So they knew the only way that we can catch him up is if it has to do with the God that he served. So they went to King Darius, pumping his head up and pretty much saying, why don't you do a decree for the next 30 days that no one can worship anyone, anything, any god but you. And pretty much had him, write the decree and stamp it with his seal. And they knew exactly what they were doing, and they knew that Daniel would pray, that he does pray 3 times a day. So when Daniel heard about it, it's one of those where he knew that he had a choice to make. Either he does not pray or he does. And Daniel decided that he was going to pray. And it wasn't that he was going to pray. He went to his window and he was praying at the window where anybody can see it. He was being bold, let me tell you. And when he did that, of course, the officials saw, they ran back and pretty much, said, to the king, did you not make this decree? Did you not do this? He was like, yeah. He was like, oh, okay. Because that Hebrew boy over there, Daniel, yeah, he's dang show worshiping his God, not worshiping you. And it was at that point that Darius knew that, okay, this was a setup. And there was no way that, Darius could backpedal because the seal and the decree was already there. So he had to, as we all know, Daniel went to the lion's den. Before he went in, Darius pretty much prayed, just, I pray that your God can rescue you. He goes in and they seal the cave, even with a seal. So the rock plays there and the seal is there so they can make sure nobody, alters it. And the king, like I said, he couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, none of that. Finally went to the cave. The den. I'm trying to get my words out, you guys. And called for Daniel. And Daniel pretty much just almost like, here I am. My God has saved me, has sent the angels to, shut up the mouths of these lions, and here I am. And the same exact faith that the officials had for Daniel was paid back to them, but not just them, but their respective families. So the officials, their wives, and their children more or less were thrown in the den. But this was another example of knowing what God's word is, or knowing what the promise is, what you know to do. And in this instance, it was just giving reverence to him, praying 3 times a day, and he did it. And it was one of those things where in doing it, he knew what the consequence was. But it wasn't just that he did it boldly. But he came out on the other end. So those are the references that I have, you guys, in reference to compromising and all that good jazz. And like I said, I'm a strong believer in not doing it. And I'll go ahead and I'll talk from personal experience. Like I said, again, I'm pretty sure everybody knows, if you have not figured it out, yes, I am in the military. And there have been times where I've had to stand my ground on some things prior to getting promoted to the rank of sergeant. I pretty much had told my first line at that point, I'm just like, I'm not against going to the board, I'm not against getting promoted or anything like that, but if you feel that in doing this is going to be a way to control me, then I don't want to do it. Because I'm still going to be true to who I am and what I know to do and what I know the right thing is. And that was just one of those instances where it's just like, and I said it, and that literally was, and it's one of those where for me to make a decree such as that, of course it would have to play itself out. But I can recall that I had a supervisor. He and I really did not get along, and this is me putting it very, very lightly. We did not get along at all. And pretty much what happened is he would make threats, and some of those threats were along the lines of taking my rank and all of this other stuff, pretty much punishment, to where I would lose my rank, which means that I would go back to being a specialist, because my commander is field grade, meaning that means that I would have to forfeit half a month pay for 2 months, 45 days restriction, 45 days extra duty. And it was one of those where it's like, because I was not a lapdog, because I did not pretty much just, you know, bend over. Now, here's the thing, mind you, in no way, shape, or form I wasn't doing my job. But it was just certain things that he would want and certain things that he would say, and he did not like my response to him. And his threat is, you know, oh, well, you know, I can take your rank. Me being the smart aleck that I am, I would rip my rank off and be ready to hand it to him like, do you want it? And it would infuriate him so much, and I had to let him know to his face, like, let me explain something to you, bro. The reason I do that, it's my declaration. It's to let you know that you're not going to use my rank as a bargaining tool. You're not going to use this to control me. You're not going to use this paycheck to control me, because here's the thing, you do not take care of me. You do not sustain my life. You do not do anything for me, but it's the God that I serve that does. Know that and trust and believe that. Because here's the reality. Because if I lose rank, I'm losing money. Screw the position, screw the power, because I don't do it for that. But I'm going to lose money for that. And of course, you know, name, drug through the dirt and everything else. In addition to forfeiting half a month's pay for 2 months, restriction and extra duties. So right there, taking my time and everything else away. One of those where, yeah, they got to make it hurt. But my response was very, very simple. It is what it is. If that's what you feel you have to do, then do it. But I won't be controlled. And I've always stood firm in that. And I've seen people compromise because, and this is one of those where when I say, you know, don't compromise, you have to figure out what works for you. You do. Because I've seen people in my profession use people's families against them. Where, you know, I want you to do this, or I want you to do something that we all know is unmoral, is unethical, it's just wrong, it's illegal. But if you don't do this, then, you know, you have a family. I can easily, you know, push punishment on you. I can take rank, money, and all of these other things. I've known people to have, you know, soldiers do things that are just illegal, whether it be illegal in terms of, you know, just what the law states, or illegal by, you know, individual professions within the military. Where it's just like, you're going to do it because I tell you to do it. But when things go left, oh, I didn't tell them to do that. Just madness. But I've had to sit here and I've had to fight that fight. And I know that fight is not over. And I fight it every day. And I'm all for it. But the one thing that I know is, I know what God's word is. I know that, you know, God, like I said, I know God will always have an escape plan ready for me. But at the end of the day, I will not compromise at all. Especially when I know what God's promise is. And even in compromising, there is nothing that anyone here on earth can give me that God ain't already got stored up for me, ready for me to have. Or there's nothing that someone can do. Like, here's the thing. There's no one here. There's nothing you can do to me that's going to scare me. Oh, I want to take your money, take it. I want to take your rank, take it. But like I said, I will be faithful, and I will be faithful to the God that I serve. That is my decree. That is my declaration. So that's all that I got, you guys. Please let me know how you feel about the content, my story, and, you know, if you have anything that you like to contribute, whether there be other examples that you know of in the Bible, by all means leave them in the description box. Not the description box. Leave a comment down below. So please rate, comment, subscribe if you have not. Thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you guys. I appreciate your time. Hopefully you appreciate this message. And until next time, again, you guys, seek a spiritual relationship with God and read your Bibles. I love you all. Until the next time. Peace.